We are back to raiding, and we are going to be facing Alexander. Now, I had walked past the Alexander raid, I had seen the bubble, I had no idea that was the raid, and all throughout my Heavensward experience, I am looking around like, where is the raid? And everybody's telling me you've walked past it and not seen it, but let me tell you, I just assumed the bubble would be something we're going in with the story at some point, something like that, but no. As it turns out, nothing could have prepared me for what was inside. Let's start with the bosses, because as a die-hard raid fan and mechanics fan, the bosses are absolutely everything to me, and I love them every single step of the way. And I'll be honest, the Alexander fights just didn't leave that much of an impression with me, which really sucks. Even when watching them back, there are definitely some majorly standout fights. Riding around in a mini tank on Gob Widow, turning into a giant ape on Ratfinks, or just generally the Constructicon of brute justice coming together are absolutely fantastic. Not to exclude, of course, Alexander Prime. There are genuinely a few reasons for why I feel this way. One of them is that I haven't done the raid on Savage yet. I say yet, please don't type yet, it is on the list to do. But it does seem to me that this time around in Heavensward, they decided to maybe make the normal version of the bosses a little bit on the easier side compared to a Realm Reborn, so allow people to get through them and see those bosses or something along those lines. It definitely felt like they stripped away some of the more difficult aspects of the fights and allowed them to be killed pretty quickly. And gear is always a factor when you're doing it in normal mode, so I understand that. What I can say is that from everything I've learned since, the Savage raids just seem to have a hell of a lot more going on in general this time around. Instead of the bosses being like tuned up with mechanics having a slight twist on them, a lot of the bosses just have flat out way more mechanics to have happen. The second thing is that a lot of the bosses, they all have the same industrial robotic theme. Now, I know, that is entirely in tune with the thematic styling of the raid. It makes total sense why they look that way. It's just that it did not leave that memorable moment on me that I expect from a raid, where each boss is different and a little bit more interesting, whereas this time around it was either giant spider tank, or it was big robot man, or smaller robot man, or spinny robot man, and things like that. So that was the thing. Not to say, and I really mean this genuinely, that the design was weak. Absolutely not. One of the most impressive things to me about the whole Alexander raid experience were the environments they created inside. It's just that the bosses didn't really stand out, whereas the actual rooms I fought them in, now they stood out big time.
So much effort went into setting the scene for each showdown that it absolutely puts other similar efforts to shame. There was a notable moment where you're riding through the internal city structure on the train rails to give you as the player a real sense of the scope and the size of Alexander that is difficult to achieve with just having simple boss arenas.
There's a lot of people who complain about trash in raids, like they just want to get to the boss. I get that, but trash can actually provide a lot of context and a lot of drama and add to that grandiose feeling that you want in a big raid. I personally don't mind it. I have no issue with it, especially with some of the crazy things you get to do inside Alexander. Working your way up the robot feels like you're climbing up the robot. That adds a lot of feel that you can't get from just having a simple boss arena. As long as that trash isn't obnoxious, it's fine. The issue is, of course, Metallic Robot A very quickly starts to look like Metallic Robot B and C and D.
Transform? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, the emote makes sense now. Jazzy!
The standout, of course, is the story. The story of Alexander, so much better than the Coils of Bahamut, which was already pretty fantastic. But if certainly you would have asked me, say, I don't know, a week ago, if a tiny black cat had the potential to save the entire world, I would have called you crazy. I mean, its only issue really is a little bit of pacing. All the way through Alexander, there's just enough hints of so much more going on. More than a simple war between greedy goblins trying to pillage the robot for their own self-serving needs. Midday is a treasure hunter and obviously has more going on, which you don't really question, because Of course, a treasure hunter has way more things going on, but they leave enough hints and breadcrumbs to lead you to this ultimate conclusion. I had never suspected that time travel would actually be a thing we're going to deal with. So having Quickthinks use his ability or his foreknowledge of the future to his advantage whenever it suited him was terrific, because you're raising questions like, wait a minute, are they actually going to go with time travel? Are we doing this? Are we actually going down that road? And yeah, we're very much going down that road. I imagine most people watching this have thought about AI in some way, or watched several movies about AI. You've probably seen Terminator and Skynet. You've probably watched things about Ultron taking on the world, being given the same mission that Alexander gets, which is peace in our time, prosperity, bring us all to our happiness, and then instantly going crazy and realizing that humans are the absolute problem and we need wiping out. Whereas, again, Squeenix does what it does so well. It takes those typical stories that we've read a million times, and it puts a little bit of care into it and says, well, what if we went a different way? And that's exactly what they did here. Alexander's ultimate decision that I have all the power to do those things that the Skynets and all those would do, but actually, the best plan for me is to turn myself off and just let life take its course. That is the best solution I can go. And having Dayan and Midday, certainly at the end of the Alexander raids, be able to live out their lives that they lost. That's the extra twist of the knife, isn't it? You have this stuff, like the Alexander story, for most stories that you would expect to hear and see and read, that's enough. But then you have the added element of Midday's sacrifice. And now they get to live in a simulation, but all those years that have been lost can be redone. And hopefully not for like eternity, because that would probably suck. But it's a really nice thought anyway.
Alexander Prime is, as it should be, the most memorable fight of the whole raid tier. It utilizes Alexander's control over time, and of course the absolutely gargantuan giant robot looming overhead. Even watching it back gives us that fear that it's supposed to during those moments. Clearly it's deserving of its spot as the final boss.
We already have LB3.
Woohoo!
That's bad.
Hello!
My final conclusion to Alexander is the gameplay, a 6 out of 10. Now that's purely because after a while the bosses just started to merge all into one. There were some really cool and interesting things, and reminder, this is pre-Savage, and Savage could very well change my mind. But on the other hand, the story is an 8 out of 10. I loved this story so much. It engrossed me, it was great, and the only reason I'm not giving it like a higher score is because occasionally those 15 to 20 minute gaps between getting back into the next boss, I mean, that's going to encourage skipping, dude. That's encouraging skipping. You got your friends sat there, they're all ready and raring to go, and you're just like, but I want to do the story, but it's really long, and I know I've got people waiting for, which was the only issue I had with that. Other than that, overall, very, very happy, and super excited to see how Squeenix modifies this again going into Stormblood. So stay tuned for that one. Thank you so much for watching, guys. And I know some of you were asking about the disc plates we got up here. We've got a super discount code for them. So if you like these, down below. Bye, everybody.